We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I am here today with Dan Haberkost. For some reason, I wanted to say Derek, but I got it right because I was able to look down at my paper fast enough and call him Dan. So I got it right. As my listeners are well aware, names are something I tend to butcher and get wrong most of the time, but I always try to make it right. But Dan is with us from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And as my listeners are well aware, that is where I called home for several years, so I know the area very, very well. He is with Front Range Land, and we are going to talk about basically some business principles, probably more so than we are syndicating, or we usually talk about syndicating, capital raising, and we get some one-off subjects. But the reason why I think Dan's message is going to be valuable is because he has basically very defined business the ways that he takes stuff in and the ways that he disposes of it or gets rid of it or sells it otherwise. And then even to take the step further, the processes that are involved after that. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Casey, thanks for having me. That was fun chatting with you a bit about Colorado. It's cool to talk with someone who knows the places and markets I'm doing a lot of business in.
Yes, sir. And I'll tell you, for those that don't know, the listeners that don't know, Colorado Springs in particular, although Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo, that whole I-25 area has just exploded. I left there in 2000, and we're talking about cities extending 15, 20 miles outside of where they were when I left. So when you start looking at the growth on a per year basis, it really, really has it's very intriguing to see and watch. And you said you moved there in 2018, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So, I mean, and even in that time span, then to now, hey, you're probably talking, a considerable amount of growth just in that little bit of time. So, well, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how you ended up in Colorado Springs of all places, and then what your business is looking like.
Sure. So to rewind, when I was 16, I was managing a portfolio of rentals along with a farm for my boss at the time, and he would go to Aruba and leave me to handle everything. And in hindsight, he was a bit of a slumlord. So that taught me about the type of real estate I did not want to own. Yeah, I remember ripping up a carpet on a hot, humid Ohio summer day. It's covered in some sort of animal feces. And then a year later, was back at that same house, ripping up the carpet again. So yeah, he had a very confrontational dynamic with his tenants and just didn't take care of the properties. So again, he just didn't do it right. But I worked that job through high school, and that taught me a lot, doing that at a young age, managing people at the farm. I learned a lot from him. And then in college, I worked full-time while going to school full-time so that I could pay for it. And I ran a landscaping company. And it was around 20-ish years old that I came from a lower middle class background in very rural Ohio. Everyone got some sort of, handyman job, or they were an electrician or something like that. They worked 40, 50, 60 hours a week for the rest of their lives, and that was that. And I did not want to fall into that same pattern. Sure. So I said, hey, if I can run this landscaping company and work and go to school full time, I can certainly figure out some sort of business to start so that I can have some freedom, have some flexibility over my time in life. And so started reading about stocks, read about different businesses. And like everyone else, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was like a light bulb went off. So I bought a duplex when I was in college. I was 21 years old. It was a house hack. Shortly thereafter, I came to visit my brother in Colorado and loved the mountains, loved the sun, just loved everything about it out here. So went home, quit my job, gave my duplex to a property manager, and drove across the country. bought another house hack out here. And it was right around that time that I realized, hey, the low and no money down stuff is great to sell courses and books, but in reality, this is a capital intensive venture. And if I want to buy a bunch of rental properties, I need to figure out how to make a substantial income. So I also just hated working for someone. I still had a job at the time. Uh,
Yep.
Long story short, I met a guy at the local real estate group out here that I actually host now who had been doing land and development for the last 40 years. He was the one I was telling you grew up in Lakewood.
Yeah.
And he lives in Pueblo West now. I would go down there every weekend, drive an hour, work with him, work for him, just learn from him. And after a good amount of time, I started to just do business with him and then eventually go off and do it on my own. So as of today, Front Range Land is my company. And what that entails is direct to seller marketing for land. And we're talking infill lots. I'm not doing anything with raw land. I'm not getting entitlements or bringing in utilities. I'm going after land that already has all that done.
Yep.
And so I just have a big funnel of leads coming in at 30 to 50 cents on the dollar for buildable infill lots. Some of them I assign, some of them I'll put a house on, some of them I'll close and sell for cash or sell on notes, but it's really just dependent on the specific lot and what works best in my situation at the time. But it's a great funnel and system because now I have land notes coming in every month, flips and assignments, and then more infrequent but much larger chunks of cash in the form of builds. And then that feeds the passive investing and acquisition of more rental properties. So I'm 26, and that's where I'm at today.
Man, that's awesome. Now, how many doors is your rental property business up to?
So I have 13 tenants among 6 properties.
Gotcha.
Technically, it's only 7 doors, but 2 of the rentals are houses rented room by room.
Gotcha.
And I can get tenants with, I have a dentist renting a bedroom from me with an 800 credit score. There's such a lack of housing that 750 has become the standard for a credit score. So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's it's unbelievable to me. And look, for the listeners out there, this episode is being recorded early June. So for the listeners out there, look at your local real estate market, stop what you're doing right now, look around at your local real estate market and realize that the Colorado, particularly that I-25 market, is probably 10 times more, in higher demand than probably where you're sitting at right now. So it's very, very, it's one of those things, man. Like you said, you've got someone with an 800 credit score renting a bedroom from you in a house. And it's just, man, that's just unfathomable, really, that those people just can't find something, or if they do find something, it's priced way too high. But likely he could be like the rest of us, or just sitting here kind of waiting, not wanting to pay too much, and on a retail level. But nevertheless, so let's talk a little bit about these infill lots. And I know that prior to the show we talked about Pueblo West specifically, but where's your deal flow coming from?
Sure. So mail is number one. I do a mix of a straightforward offer letter in an envelope, handwritten envelope, and then I switch that out, assuming that I'm in a market I know is already producing, with postcards, because some people never open the mail. So I've always found that I get additional deals from the postcards after sending a few mailers. And I like to be really straightforward. So both the postcard and the offer letter have a price. It says, "Hey, Casey, I see your lot at such and such. I'll buy it at X price, pay all closing costs, and close in a couple days, and just have a notary sent directly to you." So really straightforward. And I also have some cold calling going now, but the mail has been the bread and butter. And it's interesting with land, when you think of direct to seller, you typically think distress. But I have found, I've done almost 100 land deals at this point, it is more wealthy and apathetic than it is poor and distressed. It's like the other day, I just got a bunch of furniture at a fire sale price because this lady had a lot of money. She was moving in with her husband, who had even more money, her new husband, and she just wanted to get rid of the furniture in the house, didn't want to have to deal with moving it. So I got a bunch of nice new furniture at 10 cents on the dollar. It's the same thing with land. More often than not, I'm getting deals from wealthy baby boomers than I am from anyone in distress.
Wow. And so obviously you're getting the lists from a PVA or a property office or something like that.
Yeah. So PropStream and then tax lien lists. There are some percentage of the deals that are distressed from the tax lien list, but it's mostly just out of state, out of county owners, 10 or 20 plus years, not listed on the MLS, because then you're targeting people who bought this land a long time ago expecting to move and build.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, life got in the way and they didn't. And so now it's just a pain in their butt. They're paying taxes on it. And if you make it easy for them, if a notary will just show up at their house, they'll take convenience over retail value very often.
Yeah. Now, so how do you decide what your offer letter is going to say when it says a value on it? Because
Mhm.
here's my to add a little context to that question as to why I'm asking that. I have a friend of mine here locally who
Mhm.
owns 12 acres. Okay,
Okay.
now the 12 acres is likely, in all reality, sitting right here where I'm at right now. Sorry, I had an itch right there. Sitting right here where I'm at right now, the 12 acres is worth probably conservatively 120 to $150,000. Okay.
Okay.
Well, he gets a letter in the mail, much like what you're talking about, and it said, "Hey, I will send a notary to your house today. I'm interested in buying your 12 acres, and I will give you $18,000 for it." And while it was almost to the degree of, like, why did they even waste their stamp?
Yeah.
And so I know that you want a deal, and to make any
Mhm.
money, you have to have a deal. But where is that? What's the methodology
Mhm.
behind? And I'm not saying that was your letter at all, so I'm not
Yeah.
wanting to tie that to you. I'm just saying that
No.
that's the kind of thing that sometimes these things carry along.
Y- I'm so glad you brought this up because, okay, so most of the courses teaching this and most of the people doing this are going after raw land, acreage, recreational land, and there's a couple different systems you can pay for that use data from the county assessor site so that you can just type in, I want to pay, 40 cents per acre, and then all their, or 40 cents on the dollar per acre, and then all their letters will be 40 cents per dollar on the acre,
Okay.
but they're just relying on statistics and data from the assessor site, and they're dealing with thousands of lots that are all different.
Yep.
That's the beauty of infill, right? The first introduction I got into land was from that mentor I was telling you about who was building. So I was involved in building of houses before going after and flipping lots. And so he taught me a lot about infill lots. And for your audience, what I mean by that is, as opposed to going after acreage or raw land, I'm dealing with lots that are within a subdivision where somebody already put the time, capital, and frankly, pain in the ass to take a huge tract of raw land, bring in the entitlements, roads, utilities, all of that, zoning, and I'm going after it when it's shovel ready, which means all of that upfront work is done. It's ready to be built on. So the beauty of that is I'm dealing with tracts of thousands of lots that are almost identical. Same zoning, same size, same topography, same utility situation. So it's very, very easy to price. So big picture, that's the type of land I'm going after. From there, it depends on how hot the market is. So like in Florida, oftentimes 50 to 60 cents on the dollar is more where you're getting deals as opposed to some other markets where it's much lower. So I'll approximate the offer letter somewhere in there, right? I'll go on PropStream. I'll pull the list of a section of town where the zoning, size, and so on and so forth are all exactly the same. And then I'll do a 50 cents on the dollar offer. And it's more of an art than a science. Sometimes you'll mess it up. There was one time down in Colorado City, here in Colorado, my mail house messed up and added a zero to my land offer letter, and we still got a deal out of it because we said, "Hey, I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. It was supposed to be this." And we still got a deal. So more than anything, if someone's hesitating to get started because they're not sure what to offer, just get your mail out and you learn as you iterate. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's easier for me to price because I'm going after infill lots that are all the same generally.
Well, what you just said makes perfect sense because I think part of the reason, and whatever company that was that sent those mailers,
Hmm.
likely made one of those types of errors because our
Hmm.
agricultural land is taxed at about a tenth of what it's really worth, and
Mm.
so that would make sense as because I had forever knocked around in my mind as to where in the world they would have ever came up with that figure.
Hmm.
And so our land is taxed at about 10% of what it's really worth, our
Mm.
agricultural land, that is. And then so I'm sure that they did exactly what you just said. They were like, well, we want to
Yeah,
pay 50 cents on the dollar. Well, they didn't know that they were already getting that was already priced at a 90% discount
makes
based on
sense.
the values of the land coming from the tax office. So
Yeah.
that's very interesting, very, very intriguing take on all of that. So, so yeah. And when you're looking at it like that, and a lot of people say, well, he's paying 50 cents on the dollar, but at the same time, there is some risk involved. Have you ever
Mhm.
bought a lot that didn't end up being what you thought it was?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I actually am doing the talk at the real estate group tonight. I'm going to go through this. I have made mistakes regarding soil quality was a big problem I ran into. So Pueblo West. There was a time I got a lot under contract, and the next door lot had this massive pile of shale. So there's an example. Looking on Google Earth, sometimes the grade looks far more mild than it is in person. And again, if there's a huge hill, we're talking about lots that people want to build on. That's a big expense when it comes to the excavation, grading, and getting a pad site. So people will pay a lot less. Gosh, down in Colorado City, I ran into a street that had the water line, but the sewer line just stopped. And then those lots were well under an acre, so you couldn't do a septic. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that pop up. I've never cross the fingers. I've never lost money on a land deal. But I have done some where I certainly made less than expected or very little.
Sure, sure, yeah, and that's typical. I mean, especially when you're because operating a business like that at scale is always what's so difficult because,
Mm-hmm.
like I told you about out here where we're at, we don't operate on the townships and the sections and the perfectly square anything. We operate
Mm-hmm.
on the meets and bounds, and the meets and bounds. You could buy something you thought you got a steal on it and find out A, it's in a flood zone, or B,
Yeah.
the lot's about a third as big as you thought it was because it hadn't been surveyed since, it had a line that ran from a painted rock to a rotten stump. That
Mm.
was how they defined the corners. And so when you have obviously, and they were defined in 1926. So do you think that
Mm-hmm.
painted rock or that rotten stump is still there?
No.
Um, so that's why it's so intriguing, but
Mm-hmm.
to it comes down to really knowing your zoning, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
knowing exactly what you're looking at out there. But
Yep.
I assume that your letter probably gives you some leeway, some
Mm-hmm.
legality leeway from really jumping in there and saying, hey, this is what we, maybe some fine print at the bottom that says, hey, this offer could fluctuate depending upon due diligence or something like that.
Exactly. Verification of back taxes, liens, parcel size, zoning, everything. Yeah. So, and I have used it as an official contract a couple times. We had people actually fax them back, and their title company out here accepted them. So just making it easy, we used it. But the vast majority of the time, one of my acquisitions managers, or we send over just a more normal contract with more contingencies and such in there.
Sure, sure. I've actually had those deals, and I wonder if you have too, where you don't ever even have time to get a contract done. Somebody calls and says, "Hey, I'll take this, but I want to close it as fast as possible," and you're in good with the title company, or you're in good with the attorney, and you just boom, 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 get it done, move on. We've had those a time or two.
Hmm. Yeah, I when I first started, I was in Colorado City, and the market was really cheap. There were a number I just did where I recorded the deeds and met the person in person.
Hmm. Just yeah,
So, yeah.
yep, and get them done and knock them out, and that way
Hmm.
you just especially you just out here you've got to be careful of some older lean stuff, and because our property descriptions are considerably, like I said, they're considerably more difficult here than they
Hmm.
are the further west you go. And if you don't believe me, just look at a U.S. map and see how square things are the further west you go.
Okay.
Everything
Yeah.
tends to square up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That was for the listener, not you. I know because you said you also you also have some stuff in Florida. Is that right?
Yeah, so at the beginning of this year, Pueblo West put a moratorium on new builds and new water taps. Water rights are an issue out
Yep.
here, quite the contrary to Florida. Anyways, it has since opened up, but that caused me to pivot very quickly. And with land, again, I think about this a little bit differently or a lot differently than buy and hold investing. Buy and hold investing, I want to be in desirable areas where people are moving, but where there's constraints on supply, right? I don't want to be in a place where it's easy to build and there's thousands of vacant lots that can be bought cheaply and built on for the
Correct.
buy and hold. I do want to be there to buy and sell land, potentially build some spec houses, right? In that context, I feel like I'm just selling the shovels in a gold rush. So
That's right.
Florida fits that very well. I'm down in Southwest Florida. got some assignments closing this month, some buy and resale, and might build houses down there, but I'm a little more hesitant. I can still build here, so I'm keeping the specs going here, and potentially we'll build some houses down there. We'll see.
Good deal. Now, how did you start? How did you begin to get some deal flow down there? Same way?
Yeah, same way, just land offer letters, postcards, and cold calling.
Man, that's great. And that just seems to be kind of the go-to for you. I mean, especially
Hmm.
if you're getting shovel-ready stuff in Southwest Florida right now.
Yeah.
That's a tough nut to crack for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I do have an advantage a little bit in that one of my friends owns a mail house and I get handwritten letters at the cost of normal letters, so that does help. But you know, like anything, if you're consistent with it, you get deals. I had a guy call me that's probably gotten 20 some mailers from me in the last 3 years down in Pueblo West. He's ready to liquidate all of his lots, right? So just being consistent and present, and then having an online. If he looks us up, he'll see our website. That helps as well. A lot of people think they mail someone and that's that. No, if you have a market that's producing,
Yeah.
I would mail it every 3 months. That has worked very well for me with
Yeah.
different sorts of mailers, and then cold call as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I've always been a big proponent of well, and I say proponent of because it's just something that actually came natural to me, and it's
Mm,
absentee owners. Absentee
mm-hmm,
owners is just kind of I found that niche several years ago, and you're
mm-hmm,
right. It's difficult to mail absentee owners, but I've always said the people that can talk to somebody when they don't have anything to say are the people that make the most amount of money. Does that make
mm,
sense? So if you
yeah,
can come up with an excuse to talk to somebody, you're going to eventually make money off of. I had this talk with my wife the other night. She's in the real
yeah,
estate sales business. I said, I'm going to tell you right now. She said, well, I
yeah.
can't believe so and so did business with so and so. I said, I'm telling you right now, write it down. The very first thing I learned in the real estate business, the person is going to do business with the last real estate agent that touched them. Period. End of
Yeah.
story. I don't care if it's
Mm-hmm.
your own mother. No, I'm just kidding. Not your own mother, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And that goes for basically every other business you think of. Think about
Mm-hmm.
how a lot of times the if you're the past person, you kind of get rocks thrown at you because people are having to justify why they're not using you because they don't really have a reason other
Mm-hmm.
than somebody else just came along.
Sure.
And
Sure.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
so it's the same way, man. And if you were to not be quite as relentless as you have been and held up, and somebody else stepped in there and started sending letters, man, it doesn't take much, and you're out.
Yeah, yeah, agreed, agreed. No, and the follow up along that whole line of thinking. I, gosh, I don't have the numbers exactly, but a lot of our deals, I have my acquisitions managers. If someone showed interest, responded to a mailer, and then disappeared, they follow up until we either get a signed contract or an FU. I have them follow up. We've gotten deals on the 40th follow up. I don't do it anymore, but back when it was me calling, I remember one of the best deals I've ever gotten in Pueblo West specifically. I probably followed up 50 plus times, ended up buying at 10 and selling at 36.
There,
So certainly
I
worth it.
mean, yeah, I mean, and the whole thing is that I had somebody, and this again goes back to the real estate sales business. And when you actually sit down and you divide out, so you work like, let's say, how many those calls you did 40 calls. Let's say they took 2 minutes apiece. That's 80 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
An hour and 20 minutes, plus or minus your cost of whatever systems to keep track of it and all that.
Yeah.
But really, take that $26,000 that you made
Mm-hmm.
and divide it out amongst the actual time you spent on that one particular deal. And it's like,
Ridiculous.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's just the fact of the matter is if we could all produce that every minute of every day, we wouldn't be worrying about getting our next customer. We would be spending a life on our yacht somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at. And I always try to tell people when somebody comes and they're like, how do I make this go? And I'm like, okay, how much time have you actually spent trying to make that go? And they're like,
Hmm.
well, a week ago last Wednesday, I spent 10 minutes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
exactly. There's your
Yeah.
problem. You're not
Yep.
relentless about keeping things moving forward, paying
Yes.
attention to where you're at today, realizing what moves the market. And the one thing in my letters I always realized moved the market was FOMO, fear of missing out. And
Mm-hmm.
that was sending a letter with the idea that, hey, we need to talk about this because you might miss out on where this market is today if
Mm-hmm.
we don't move forward.
Yeah.
And letter writing is a very intriguing thing. And I'm going to step back to, I hate to take more time. I want you to talk some more because I want to get a couple other ideas from you. But
Sure.
I'm going to tell you that you hit on one of my biggest, like, people in the real estate business that I've coached and talked to over the years. I tell them,
Mm-hmm.
don't even worry about sending a letter to anybody unless there is some degree of handwritten on it, whether that's a
Mm.
handwritten envelope, whether that's a, now, I'm a proponent of a blue signature at the bottom of every page of every letter,
Mm-hmm.
a real stamp on the corner, and not a bulk mail, a real stamp on the corner, a blue ink signature on the letter itself, and a
Mm-hmm.
mail merged letter at that that says, "Dear Mr. Haberkost, I
Yeah.
am." Here we are.
Yeah.
Now you said you have handwritten letters, which I know, but tell us a little bit more about that and why you think it works, because I know why it works. But
Yeah, well, especially right now, and especially in Florida, it's no secret that Florida's growing. A lot of people are down there, and so you got to think, how do I differentiate myself from all the other people sending mail, making calls, so on and so forth. And for me specifically, handwritten letters have been a big part of that because who doesn't open a handwritten letter? I
yeah,
always do. I throw out everything else. Um, and then additionally, for me specifically, having a website, it's not great. It's very simple, but it shows houses we're building, and it creates a level of legitimacy that a lot of other people trying to go after land don't have
and what
because
does
they
it
are.
cost you to have it? How much does it
I think
cost to
I
have it? $100 a
well,
year?
yeah, that's just
I
gonna say
mean,
like $100 a year, not even. And it's not great, but it doesn't matter because
it doesn't
there's
have to
videos of
be.
me. Yeah, it serves its purpose. And that's been great too because again, a lot of other people going after land have no presence. They're just trying to flip it, and so that's another differentiator with me. I actually have the cash. I buy almost all my lots. I've very rarely done assignments. And again, most of my competition doesn't have money, and so they are trying to just assign. So I can legitimately say, Casey, I will close in 5 days through the title company, cash deal right now. And so
Yeah.
that helps a lot too. So specifically within land, those couple of things have helped a lot. And then just being consistent over the long term, like we already hit on, is hard to go wrong with. And probably the last thing I haven't hit on that I want to hit on is if you try and go to Denver or Tampa or Los Angeles, right, one of the major metros, this is really, really tough. So I think about, okay, where are people flocking? And then because of all that growth and subsequent price growth in the major metros, where are people getting pushed to the second and third level markets outside? So Pueblo West here in Colorado, right? Denver grew like crazy, then Colorado Springs, and people just got pushed straight down I-25, straight down the Front Range. So for years and years, people didn't really want to go to Pueblo West. Lots were trading at 5 or 10 grand. And now that it's growing, people were getting pushed there. I had a friend in Texas asking, well, where do I go? And I said, well, Austin and Dallas have blown up. Are there major highways between them with some towns along those that might be growing rapidly? Maybe look there. In
Yeah.
Florida, same sort of thing. So looking at those second and third level markets outside of the growth where people are getting pushed helps as well because a lot of time your competition is slightly behind in that area that everyone is already in, right? So if you're just outside of that, that's worked really well for me. In Pueblo West last year, I was getting deals at 30, 40 cents on the dollars every 100 mailers. Oh,
Yeah.
I wish I could still do that. I can't anymore,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
that's yeah, and that's again the difficult part. I think we all run into is, and I think everybody looks at Instagram and looks at Twitter and looks at all this other stuff, and all they hear from all these people all the way around is scale. Let's build on scale. Let's build on scale. Let's scale up. And the problem with scaling up is it's not that we don't want to do it. We all obviously want to do it, but it's like you just said, now you have to shift a little bit. You might not have as many lots in this one spot that you're getting. You have to shift. You have to start looking elsewhere. And so why it's tough to go up and then go out all at the same time while keeping the same business model. So, well, listen, man, we're running up on our time here, but we've got a couple of questions that I ask every guest that comes on the show. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just, and I want to, first of all, I want to thank you for such an interesting discussion. I know I talked probably as much as you, but I feel like we got a lot done. We accomplished a lot, and hopefully the listeners can learn something from whatever it is we've gone back and forth about. But the first question is, what is the best book that you have ever read or are currently reading?
Rich Dad Poor Dad aside, I love Sapiens. I love the book Sapiens. I've read that 3 times, 3 years in a row. I think it's really insightful into just people, human nature. So Sapiens.
Sure. Awesome, man. I haven't read that, but definitely needs to go on our list of recommendations for our listeners. All right. What is a dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
Yeah, I want to go heli skiing in Aspen or Crested Butte.
Oh, well, that's not far from where you're at, man.
Yeah, well, I love snowboarding. Right, so snowboarding, not skiing, but I've never gone up in the helicopter to the backcountry that way, so that's on the list.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I never did either when I lived out there. They always talked about it, and of course, cross country skiing lost my interest very, very fast. Matter of fact, I never even went. All I had to do was watch a video of it one time, and I was like, "Yep, that's enough for me." Yeah. So that backcountry stuff is fun as long as you're going downhill, as far as I'm concerned. So But well, listen, man. Yeah. So Dan, how can the listeners, if they've heard something that's resonated with them or want to learn more about what you do or how you do it, or maybe even have a question about, maybe they want to sell their lot, maybe somebody in Pueblo West is listening and they want to sell their lot to you. How can they reach out and get a hold of you?
DanHaberkost.com or Dan Haberkost on Facebook or Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Now, for the listeners, as they're well aware, I am kind of ready to make sure everybody knows how to spell that, and that is Haberkost, in case you're driving. You can check it out in the show notes. So, listeners, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you don't mind to go and leave us a 5-star review, we would much, much appreciate it, and it would help us reach more folks out there that want to learn about how to become a cash flow pro. And Dan, again, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to be with us. So thank everybody.
Thanks for having me, Casey.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan.
Cash Flow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.